March 15th, 1916, 0623 hours, British Forward Trench, Somme Sector, France. Private Thomas Ashford, 22 years old, crouches in a fire bay carved from French chalk and reinforced with sandbags that never quite stay dry. In his hands is a Lee-Enfield Mark III rifle that has been transformed by modifications that seem more appropriate for a submarine than an infantry weapon. Mounted atop the rifle is a wooden frame extending approximately 18 inches above the weapon's normal height. Attached to this frame is a simple periscope, two small mirrors angled at 45 degrees, one at the top of the frame and one at eye level, allowing the shooter to observe over the parapet without exposing his head. A wooden stock extension runs from the rifle's original buttstock down to a secondary shoulder rest, positioned 18 inches lower, allowing the shooter to brace the weapon while keeping his body below the trench line. A cord runs from this lower position up through the wooden frame to the rifle's trigger, creating a mechanical linkage that lets Ashford fire the weapon while looking through the periscope and maintaining his entire body below cover. The complete system, rifle, frame, periscope, trigger cord, transforms a standard infantry rifle into what soldiers have begun calling a trench periscope rifle, or simply a periscope gun. The mathematics seem awkward but necessary. Standard rifle shooting requires exposing the head and shoulders above the parapet to aim and fire, presenting approximately 18 to 24 inches of target area to enemy snipers who have learned to fire at any movement along the trench line. German snipers equipped with telescopic sights can hit exposed heads at ranges exceeding 400 yards, making even brief exposure extremely dangerous. The periscope rifle eliminates this exposure entirely. A soldier can aim, fire, and reload while remaining completely below the parapet, presenting zero target to enemy marksmen. But this safety comes at substantial cost. The indirect sight picture through dual mirrors degrades accuracy significantly. The improvised trigger mechanism affects precision, and the awkward shooting position makes rapid fire difficult. Ashford's platoon sergeant, a veteran of 18 months in the trenches who has watched too many men die from sniper fire, had explained the weapon yesterday with the weary pragmatism of someone who has learned that survival matters more than heroics. The Hun snipers own the daylight. Show your head for 5 seconds and you'll be dead before you hear the shot. This contraption lets you shoot back without dying. You won't hit much, but neither will Jerry if he can't see you. Sometimes not dying is winning. In 17 minutes, the morning stand-to will end, and soldiers on both sides will begin the dangerous work of trench maintenance, observation, and sniping that characterizes daylight hours on the Western Front. Ashford will use the periscope rifle to fire at German positions 200 yards distant, attempting to suppress enemy activity and prevent German snipers from dominating no man's land. He has no idea if he can actually hit anything shooting through mirrors with a trigger cord, no idea if the wooden frame can withstand the rifle's recoil without breaking or shifting, no idea if this represents practical innovation or just another desperate improvisation that provides psychological comfort without tactical effectiveness. But in 17 minutes, he'll discover whether eliminating exposure risk justifies the accuracy penalty, or if some compromises create more problems than they solve, regardless of how clever the engineering seems. World War I trench warfare had created a tactical environment fundamentally different from any previous conflict, and by 1916, both sides had recognized that conventional infantry tactics often proved suicidal when applied to the realities of static defensive positions protected by barbed wire, machine guns, and precision rifle fire. The Lee-Enfield rifle, in its various marks, represented British infantry firepower since the early 1900s. The Mk3 variant, adopted in 1907, was a bolt-action rifle chambered in .303 British, feeding from a 10-round detachable magazine. The weapon was accurate to 600-plus yards in skilled hands, reliable in adverse conditions, and capable of rapid fire. A trained soldier could achieve 15 to 20 aimed rounds per minute using the rifle's smooth bolt action and quick magazine changes. These characteristics made the Lee-Enfield excellent for open warfare, the mobile, maneuvering combat that military doctrine assumed would characterize modern conflict. Soldiers would advance, take firing positions, engage visible enemies at ranges of 200 to 600 yards, and maneuver to advantageous positions while maintaining fire superiority. Trench warfare demolished these assumptions. By late 1914, the Western Front had evolved into a continuous line of fortified positions extending from the English Channel to Switzerland. Neither side could outflank the other. Frontal assaults across no man's land resulted in catastrophic casualties without achieving breakthroughs. The war became static, with soldiers occupying trenches for weeks or months, separated from enemy positions by distances of 100 to 400 yards. In this environment, standard rifle shooting became extremely dangerous. Sniper dominance. Both sides deployed marksmen equipped with telescopic sights, assigned to kill enemy personnel who exposed themselves. These snipers occupied concealed positions with clear fields of fire across no man's land and along enemy trench lines. Any soldier who raised his head above the parapet for observation or firing presented an immediate target. Casualty patterns. British casualty reports from 1915 showed that approximately 30 to 40% of non-battle casualties, injuries and deaths outside major attacks, resulted from sniper fire during routine trench occupation. Soldiers were killed while observing, while firing at enemy positions, during trench maintenance, and even while resting if they stood in locations visible to enemy snipers. Suppression effects. The constant sniper threat created psychological pressure that affected all trench operations. Soldiers learned to move carefully, to avoid routine activities that created patterns snipers could anticipate, and to minimize exposure during daylight. This suppression reduced combat effectiveness even when soldiers weren't being actively targeted. Limited counter-sniper capability. Returning fire at snipers required exposing oneself to shoot, creating a tactical paradox where attempting to suppress enemy snipers exposed British soldiers to the very threat they were trying to neutralize. Standard doctrine of shoot back when shot at didn't work when shooting back got you killed. These problems were most acute during daylight hours when visibility allowed precision fire. Night operations reduced sniper effectiveness but created other complications. Reduced visibility made navigation difficult, increased friendly fire risks, and allowed enemy patrols to approach undetected. The British Army's response to sniper threats evolved 1915 to 1916. Dedicated sniper training. The Army established sniper schools teaching marksmanship, concealment, observation, and fieldcraft. British snipers received scoped rifles, initially commercial sporting rifles with telescopic sights, later standardized military sniper rifles, and were organized into specialized sections assigned to infantry battalions. Improved positions. Engineers developed sniper positions with steel loopholes, armored plates with small openings that allowed observation and firing while protecting the sniper's head. These positions provided excellent protection, but were fixed locations that enemy counter-snipers learned to target. Periscopes for observation. Simple periscopes using mirrors or prisms allowed soldiers to observe over parapets without exposure. These became standard trench equipment, manufactured by the thousands and issued throughout the British Expeditionary Force. Indirect fire techniques, artillery and mortar fire, could suppress enemy positions without requiring direct observation, but required forward observers who themselves needed to see targets, recreating the exposure problem at a different point in the chain. None of these solutions addressed a fundamental problem. Ordinary infantrymen needed some means to fire at enemy positions during daylight without presenting themselves as sniper targets. Snipers and loophole positions provided limited coverage. Periscopes allowed observation but not engagement. Artillery required specialized coordination. What was needed was a way for regular soldiers to deliver rifle fire at enemy trenches while remaining completely concealed, maintaining the suppressive effect of rifle fire without accepting the casualties that conventional fire positions created. The solution emerged not from official doctrine or engineering programs, but from soldiers in the trenches improvising solutions to immediate tactical problems. The exact origin of periscope rifles is unclear. Multiple units in different sectors appear to have developed similar concepts independently during 1915, suggesting the idea emerged organically from the tactical environment rather than being invented by a single individual. The basic concept was straightforward. If periscopes allowed seeing without exposure, why not mount a periscope on a rifle to allow shooting without exposure? The mechanical challenges were equally straightforward. The rifle needed to be elevated above the firer's normal position, the sights needed to be replaced with a periscope system, and some mechanism needed to allow trigger operation from the lowered shooting position. Early improvised versions appeared in British trenches by mid-1915. These ranged from crude to relatively sophisticated. Simple frame mounts, wooden frames that elevated the rifle 12 to 18 inches above normal height, with the soldier aiming by looking along the rifle's side or using crude sights mounted on the frame. These allowed firing with reduced exposure, only hands and arms visible, but still required partial exposure and provided no real aiming capability. Mirror sights, small mirrors mounted at angles to reflect the rifle's iron sights to the shooter's eye position. These provided actual aiming, but were difficult to align properly and fragile. A single impact could misalign the mirrors, destroying the sight picture. Periscope sights, purpose-built periscope assemblies with mirrors at the top, above the rifle, and bottom at eye level, creating an offset sight line. These worked like ship periscopes, allowing direct observation of the target area through the optical path. Trigger mechanisms, various approaches to operating the trigger from the lowered position, cords or wires attached to the trigger and routed to the shooter's position, wooden or metal levers that transferred motion from a lower control to the trigger, or extended trigger guards that could be reached from the lowered stance. By early 1916, several patterns of periscope rifles had emerged through trial and error in different sectors. The Australian pattern, developed by Anzac forces at Gallipoli and later refined on the Western Front, this version used a sophisticated wooden frame with a mirror periscope and a cord trigger mechanism. The frame was hinged to allow the rifle to be removed for cleaning and maintenance. This pattern became one of the most widely copied designs. The Gallipoli pattern, a simpler design using a wooden stock extension and basic mirror arrangement developed during the Gallipoli campaign, where trench warfare in a different environment created similar tactical requirements. Countless variations created by individual soldiers or unit armorers using available materials, scrap wood, salvaged mirrors, wire, and imagination. These ranged from barely functional to surprisingly effective. The British Army's official recognition of periscope rifles came gradually. Initially, these were considered soldier innovations, tolerated but not officially sanctioned. By mid-1916, as the devices proved their utility and as casualties from sniper fire continued mounting, the Army began to acknowledge their value. Some units began producing standardized periscope rifle kits using workshop facilities behind the lines. These kits typically included wooden frame, a carefully constructed frame that attached to the rifle's stock and barrel, extending approximately 18 inches above the rifle's normal height. The frame included mounting points for the periscope, provisions for the trigger mechanism, and sometimes additional features like adjustable height or quick release mechanisms for rapid disassembly. Periscope assembly. 2 small mirrors, typically 2 to 3 inch square, mounted in wooden or metal housings at 45-degree angles. The top mirror faced forward toward the target. The bottom mirror faced upward toward the top mirror, creating an optical path that allowed the shooter to see what the top mirror saw. The mirrors were often salvaged from shaving kits, damaged vehicle mirrors, or purpose-manufactured using glass and silvering techniques. Trigger mechanism. Most commonly, a cord or cable attached to the trigger and routed down through the frame to a handle or ring positioned at the lower shooting position. Pulling the cord pulled the trigger. More sophisticated versions used lever systems or rod linkages, but these were heavier and more complex. Stock extension. A wooden extension attached to the rifle's buttstock, creating a secondary shoulder rest positioned 18 inches below the rifle's original position. This allowed the shooter to brace the weapon against their shoulder while keeping their head at the periscope viewing position. The complete periscope rifle system added approximately 3 to 5 pounds to the standard Lee-Enfield's 9-pound weight, creating a 12 to 14-pound weapon that was front-heavy and awkward to maneuver. The wooden frame was approximately 24 to 30 inches long overall, making the complete assembly bulky and difficult to transport through narrow trenches. Using the periscope rifle required techniques substantially different from standard rifle shooting. Positioning. The shooter would crouch or kneel in the trench, positioning the rifle so the barrel and periscope extended above the parapet, while the shooter's body remained below cover. The stock extension braced against the shoulder provided stability. Aiming. The shooter looked through the lower mirror, which reflected the image from the upper mirror, showing the view forward from the rifle's position. This created a sight picture that showed targets but required mental adjustment. The mirrors reversed left-right orientation depending on configuration and introduced slight distortion. Firing. Pulling the trigger cord discharged the rifle. The indirect trigger mechanism introduced a slight delay and affected trigger control. Achieving a smooth, predictable trigger pull was difficult through a cord system that introduced friction and flex. Follow-up shots. Working the bolt to chamber the next round required either removing the rifle from the firing position or using one hand to manipulate the bolt while keeping the rifle positioned, awkward and slow compared to conventional bolt operation. March 15, 1916. 0640 hours. Private Ashford positions the Periscope rifle in a firing step cut into the trench wall, resting the wooden frame on the sandbag parapet. The rifle's barrel extends above the sandbags, pointing across no man's land toward the German trenches 200 yards distant. Ashford kneels below the parapet, his head level with the lower mirror of the periscope. Through the mirror, he sees the view from above the trench: cratered ground, tangled barbed wire, occasional wooden stakes, and in the distance the enemy parapet, appearing as a dark line against the gray morning sky. The image is clear enough to distinguish features, but lacks the precision of direct vision. The mirrors introduce slight distortion and reduce brightness. He centers the sight picture on a section of German parapet where intelligence reports suggest a sniper position. At 200 yards through mirrors, he can see the general area but cannot distinguish specific features like loopholes or observation points. His finger finds the trigger cord, a length of strong twine running from the rifle's trigger down through the wooden frame to a small wooden handle at his position. He takes up tension on the cord, feeling resistance as it pulls against the trigger's spring pressure. Aim is approximate. He's pointing at an area rather than a specific target, hoping volume of fire will suppress German activity rather than achieving precision hits. He pulls the cord. The rifle discharges. The report is the familiar crack of .303 British ammunition, loud enough to echo along the trench line. Recoil drives the rifle backward and upward against the parapet. The wooden frame flexes slightly, absorbing some energy, but the overall system rocks backward noticeably. Through the periscope, Ashford sees nothing. The recoil shifted the sight picture, and he has no idea where the bullet impacted. Somewhere across no man's land, presumably, but whether it came within 10 yards or 100 yards of his aim point is unknowable. He works the Lee-Enfield's bolt, extracting the spent case and chambering a fresh round. This requires lifting his left hand above the parapet briefly to reach the bolt handle, a moment of partial exposure, though far less than standard shooting would require. He fires again, and again, 5 rounds in approximately 45 seconds. Each shot is an exercise in indirect fire, pulling a cord, managing recoil through an awkward frame, working the bolt, and repeating. The sight picture through the periscope shows the general target area, but provides no feedback on effectiveness. After 5 shots, Ashford pauses to assess. Has he hit anything? Unlikely. Has he suppressed German activity? Possibly. The Germans know someone is firing at their position, even if the British soldier is invisible. Has he avoided being shot by a sniper? Certainly. He has maintained complete concealment throughout the engagement. This is the periscope rifle's fundamental trade-off: safety versus effectiveness. Ashford is alive and uninjured, which matters more than whether his shots achieved hits. The weapon serves a psychological and suppressive purpose, rather than a precision purpose. He continues firing, emptying the rifle's 10-round magazine. Reloading requires removing the rifle from its firing position, inserting a fresh magazine or charger clips, and repositioning the weapon, a process taking 20 to 30 seconds, during which no fire can be delivered. This engagement continues intermittently through the morning. Ashford fires approximately 40 rounds across 3 hours, averaging 1 shot every 4 to 5 minutes, sufficient to remind the Germans that the British trench is active and alert, but not sufficient volume to constitute effective suppressive fire. German return fire is sporadic. A few rifle shots impact near the periscope rifle's position, but the Germans cannot identify a specific target. They're shooting at estimated positions based on muzzle flash and sound, not visible targets. This demonstrates the periscope rifle's defensive value, denying the enemy clear targets even while engaging them. By mid-morning, the wooden frame shows signs of stress. The recoil has loosened some joints, and one of the mirror mounts has shifted slightly, degrading the sight picture. The trigger cord has stretched from repeated use, creating more slack and less predictable trigger control. Ashford withdraws the periscope rifle from the firing position and examines it in the relative safety of the trench traverse. The mirrors are intact but dirty. Dust and moisture have accumulated on the glass surfaces, further reducing image quality. The wooden frame has developed a small crack near one mounting point, where repeated recoil stress has exceeded the wood's strength. Maintenance will be required, cleaning the mirrors, tightening or replacing the trigger cord, reinforcing or replacing the cracked frame components. This overhead, constant maintenance and repair is characteristic of improvised equipment designed under field conditions rather than engineered for durability. The platoon sergeant examines the weapon and nods approval. "Good work, Ashford. You kept Jerry's heads down and yours attached. That's a successful morning in this war." This encapsulates the periscope rifle's role in trench warfare. It's not measured by hits achieved or enemies killed, but by suppression provided and casualties avoided. Success is staying alive while denying the enemy freedom of action. The widespread adoption and use of periscope rifles through 1916 to 1918 revealed both their tactical utility and their inherent limitations when employed in the sustained static warfare of the Western Front. Estimates of periscope rifle numbers are difficult. Most were locally manufactured or soldier improvised rather than factory produced, leaving minimal documentation. British units probably fielded several thousand periscope rifles across various fronts by late 1916, with numbers varying by sector based on local conditions and command attitudes toward improvised equipment. Distribution was informal. Some battalions had periscope rifles available for any soldier who wanted to use one. Others concentrated them in specific roles: designated marksmen who would use them for harassment fire, sentries who needed observation and engagement capability, or specialists assigned to suppress known enemy positions. Training and morale. The periscope rifles provided soldiers with a way to fight back against enemy snipers without suicide. This psychological benefit shouldn't be underestimated. Soldiers felt less helpless when they had means to engage enemies, even if the actual tactical effect was modest. However, the limitations were substantial. Testing conducted by British Ordnance in 1917 attempted to quantify periscope rifle accuracy compared to standard rifle fire. Results showed that accuracy degraded approximately 60 to 70% when using periscope rifles from typical field positions. A shooter who could achieve 6-inch groups at 200 yards with standard sights might produce 15 to 20-inch groups with the periscope system, adequate for hitting human-sized targets but insufficient for precision work. Rate of fire reduction. The awkward shooting position, indirect trigger mechanism, and difficult bolt operation reduced practical rate of fire by approximately 40 to 50%. A soldier capable of 15 to 20 aimed rounds per minute with standard technique might achieve only 8 to 12 rounds per minute with the periscope rifle. Mechanical unreliability. The awkward construction and constant recoil stress caused frequent failures. Trigger cords broke or stretched, mirror mounts loosened, wooden frames cracked. Maintenance requirements were substantial, and complete failure rates approached 15 to 20% during extended field use. Limited tactical flexibility. The periscope rifle excelled at static defensive fire from prepared positions, but was unsuitable for mobile operations, advancing fire, or any scenario requiring rapid position changes. The bulk and awkward configuration made carrying and deploying the weapon difficult. Vulnerability to countermeasures. German forces developed techniques to counter periscope rifles. Observant snipers learned to watch for the distinctive profile of periscope frames extending above parapets and would fire at these, sometimes destroying the periscope or frame. Artillery could target sections of trench where periscope rifles operated, using the visible muzzle flash and smoke as aiming references. Combat effectiveness assessment from after-action reports suggests periscope rifles provided net tactical benefit in specific contexts. Defensive sectors. In quiet sectors where both sides primarily focused on holding positions rather than aggressive operations, periscope rifles provided useful harassment capability with minimal casualty cost. Their presence forced enemy caution and reduced German freedom of action. High-risk areas. In sectors facing intensive German sniper activity, periscope rifles allowed some return fire that conventional methods couldn't provide. Even if hits were rare, the suppressive effect had value. Resource-limited units. Units lacking dedicated sniper sections or specialized counter-sniper equipment found periscope rifles provided basic capability that otherwise wouldn't exist. However, they showed minimal value in offensive operations. Assaults, raids, and mobile actions required weapons compatible with movement and rapid engagement. Periscope rifles were left in trenches during attacks, serving no role in offensive operations. Precision engagement. Any scenario requiring accurate fire at specific targets favored conventional sighting and specialized marksmen. The periscope rifle's accuracy limitations made it unsuitable for destroying specific threats. High-intensity combat. During major battles with heavy artillery preparation and mass infantry assaults, periscope rifles contributed little. The scale of combat overwhelmed their limited suppressive effect. German forces developed their own periscope rifle variants, though apparently in smaller numbers than British equivalents. German doctrine placed greater emphasis on dedicated sniper sections with properly scoped rifles, viewing improvised periscope rifles as inferior to purpose-designed sniper systems. French forces also employed periscope rifles with variations reflecting their different standard rifles, Lebel and Berthier, and tactical preferences. French designs sometimes incorporated more sophisticated optical systems, using prisms rather than simple mirrors to create clearer sight pictures.